Tonight, as you settle into your comfortable surroundings, I want you to imagine something that might fundamentally alter how you view our place in this vast universe. Picture worlds so utterly alien, so incomprehensibly hostile, that they make the harshest environments on Earth seem like peaceful gardens. What we're about to explore together are planets that challenge everything we thought we knew about what a world can be. If you find these deep dives into cosmic mysteries as fascinating as I do, I'd genuinely appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps more curious minds discover these explorations into the unknown. The visuals are here to guide us through these alien landscapes, but feel free to close your eyes and let your imagination paint these impossible worlds. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. There's something profound about contemplating these distant nightmares while we're all safely gathered here on our gentle blue world. Let's begin this journey into cosmic horror. You know, when we first started discovering planets beyond our solar system back in the 1990s, astronomers expected to find worlds arranged much like our own neighborhood. Rocky planets close to their stars, gas giants farther out, everything following predictable, logical patterns. Instead, we discovered something far more disturbing. We found chaos. We found worlds that operate according to rules so extreme, they seem to mock our understanding of planetary physics. Tonight, we're going to explore planets where it literally rains glass, sideways, at speeds that would shred a building. We'll visit worlds where the ground beneath your feet would be pure diamond, compressed under pressures that could flatten entire cities. We'll journey to places where a single day lasts longer than human civilization has existed, and where temperature swings are so violent they could boil oceans and freeze atmospheres solid within the same orbit. These aren't science fiction fantasies or mathematical abstractions. These are real worlds, orbiting real stars, confirmed by our most sophisticated telescopes, and studied by teams of dedicated scientists who sometimes can't quite believe what their instruments are telling them. The universe, it turns out, has an imagination far more twisted than any horror writer who ever lived. It has crafted worlds that redefine what we consider extreme, places that exist in states of perpetual catastrophe that would annihilate anything we recognize as life within microseconds. Let me start with something that will immediately shatter your assumptions about what planets can be. There's a world called HD 189733b, located about 63 light years from Earth. When you first look at images from our most powerful telescopes, this planet appears almost Earth-like. It's a beautiful, deep blue color that seems to promise oceans and familiar skies. For just a moment, you might think you're looking at a distant cousin of our own world, but that stunning blue color isn't from peaceful oceans reflecting starlight. It's from particles of glass suspended in an atmosphere so violent it defies comprehension. On HD 189733b, it rains molten silicate glass, and those glass particles are whipped around by winds that reach over 4,000 miles per hour. That's faster than the speed of sound. Imagine stepping onto the surface of this world, if such a surface could even exist. The very air around you would be filled with microscopic shards of glass, moving at velocities that would strip flesh from bone in seconds. This is a planet where the concept of weather becomes something from our deepest nightmares. The rain falling from those deceptively beautiful blue clouds isn't water, but molten rock heated to over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The storms don't just bring precipitation, they bring glacified death at supersonic speeds. HD 189733b belongs to a class of planets that astronomers call hot Jupiters, but don't let that familiar name fool you. These aren't just larger versions of Jupiter sitting a bit closer to their stars. These are gas giants that have wandered so close to their parent suns that they exist in states of perpetual atmospheric catastrophe. They represent a complete violation of everything we thought we understood about how solar systems should be organized. When we first discovered these hot Jupiters, they forced astronomers to completely rethink planetary formation theory. We found massive worlds completing orbits around their stars in just a few Earth days, so close that their atmospheres are literally boiling away into space, leaving trails of vaporized planets streaming behind them like cosmic comets. Consider WASP-12b, a planet so close to its star that it's being slowly devoured by the very sun it orbits. The gravitational forces are so intense, they're stretching this gas giant into an egg shape, pulling its atmosphere away in long streamers of superheated gas. This isn't just a hostile world, it's a dying world, being consumed by its own star over the course of millions of years. Imagine the cosmic horror of existing on a planet that's literally being eaten alive by the sky itself. The temperatures on these hot Jupiters create weather patterns unlike anything we see in our solar system. On some of these worlds, it rains iron. Not metaphorically, but literally. The daysides are so hot that even iron exists as a gas, rising into the atmosphere only to condense and fall back down as metallic precipitation when the planet rotates and the metal vapor cools. Other worlds experience ruby and sapphire snow. On planets like HATP-7b, the extreme temperatures and pressures create conditions where aluminum oxide, the same compound that forms rubies and sapphires on Earth, condenses out of the gas and falls like precious gemstone precipitation. It's simultaneously beautiful and utterly lethal, a reminder that the universe can create wonders that would kill you instantly if you tried to witness them firsthand. But perhaps the most psychologically disturbing aspect of these worlds is their relationship with time itself. Many of these planets are tidally locked, meaning one side permanently faces their star while the other remains in eternal darkness. Picture the existential horror of such a world. On the day side, temperatures soar to over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to vaporize most metals. The ground itself glows red hot, and the air shimmers with heat that would kill any known form of life instantly. Meanwhile, just a few hundred miles away, the night side exists in perpetual winter. Temperatures drop to hundreds of degrees below zero. Any atmosphere that isn't permanently frozen to the surface is constantly flowing from the hot side to the cold side, creating windstorms that never end, never pause, never give these worlds a moment of peace. Between these two extremes lies what astronomers call the Terminator Zone, the boundary between day and night. Here, we find some of the most violent weather in the known universe. The temperature differential creates atmospheric dynamics so extreme they defy easy description. Imagine standing at this boundary, watching supersonic winds howl past, carrying clouds of vaporized rock from the day side to the night side, where they freeze instantly and fall like toxic snow. The scale of these temperature differentials becomes even more horrifying when you consider that many of these hot Jupiters are larger than our own Jupiter, which could contain over 1,000 Earths. Imagine a world so massive that our entire planet would be nothing more than a small island in its vast ocean of superheated gas. And then imagine that entire massive world existing in conditions so extreme that its atmosphere is literally boiling away into space. These discoveries have revealed something deeply unsettling about planetary formation. We used to think that planets formed where they currently orbit, that gas giants naturally formed in the cooler outer regions of solar systems where ice and gas could condense. But hot Jupiters prove that massive planets can migrate inward, spiraling closer and closer to their stars over millions of years. This migration process is itself a form of cosmic horror. Imagine being on a world that was once temperate, where conditions might have even been suitable for life, only to watch your planet slowly spiral into the fires of its own sun. The process would take geological ages, but it would be inevitable, unstoppable, a slow-motion apocalypse played out over millions of years. What makes this even more disturbing is the realization that this could have happened in our own solar system. The gas giants we see today might once have been much closer to the sun. If their migration had continued, Earth itself might have been consumed, swallowed up by a wandering gas giant, or flung out into the cold depths of space. But the atmospheric horrors of hot Jupiters represent only the beginning of our journey into cosmic nightmare. There are worlds out there made entirely of diamond, compressed under pressures so intense they would crush our planet to dust. There are planets where it rains sulfuric acid, and places where gravity is so powerful that time itself moves differently than it does here on Earth. As we continue deeper into this catalogue of cosmic horrors, we'll discover that these hellish worlds aren't rare exceptions or cosmic accidents. They represent the normal state of planetary existence in our galaxy. For every world that might be even remotely Earth-like, there are countless others that exist in states of perpetual catastrophe. The gentle conditions we enjoy on our blue world, the stable climate, the breathable atmosphere, the liquid water, the protective magnetic field, all of these represent an almost impossibly rare combination of factors. We're not the rule in this universe. We're the exception, a tiny island of habitability in an ocean of cosmic horror. But that's exactly what makes our exploration of these nightmare worlds so important. Each discovery helps us understand just how precious and improbable our existence truly is. Every breath you take, every moment of stability you experience, represents a victory against cosmic odds, so overwhelming they approach the miraculous. As we venture deeper into this cosmic chamber of horrors, we encounter worlds that challenge the very foundations of what we consider possible. Let me take you to a place called 55 Cancri E, a super-Earth that exists in conditions so extreme they transform the familiar into the impossible. Picture this: a world where the very ground beneath your feet is composed of diamond. Not scattered deposits like we find on Earth, but an entire planetary interior that may be a solid diamond sphere larger than our moon, wrapped in a thin shell of molten rock. The surface temperatures reach over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, creating an environment where this crystalline foundation exists under pressures that would compress a human body to the size of a marble. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Diamond worlds sound almost fantastical, like something from a fairy tale about cosmic treasures. But this isn't a treasure world waiting to be mined. This is a hellscape where the most precious substance on Earth becomes the foundation for unimaginable suffering. The atmospheric conditions above these diamond surfaces create their own unique form of nightmare. The extreme heat doesn't just affect the solid surface, it creates an atmosphere of vaporized rock and metal that exists in a constant state of chemical chaos. Elements that should never coexist in gaseous form swirl through skies that glow with their own internal heat. The very air, if you could call it that, would be toxic beyond anything we can imagine, filled with compounds that would dissolve your lungs before you could even attempt to breathe. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. The temperature fluctuations on these diamond worlds cause the crystalline surface to expand and contract, creating geological activity unlike anything we see on Earth. Imagine diamond earthquakes, where crystalline formations the size of mountain ranges crack and shift with sounds that would shatter eardrums if anyone could survive long enough to hear them. The pressure dynamics create materials that exist nowhere else in the universe. We think of diamond as the hardest natural substance on Earth. But on these worlds, even diamond is crushed into forms of matter that we can barely comprehend. The very atoms are forced closer together than should be physically possible, creating substances that push against the fundamental limits of what reality allows. Moving deeper into our catalogue of cosmic nightmares, we encounter planets that take atmospheric hostility to entirely new levels. These are the acid rain worlds, places that make the most polluted environments on Earth seem like pristine wilderness. Take HD 209458b, a planet where the atmosphere is so chemically aggressive that it literally strips atoms from any material it contacts. But this isn't just corrosive in the way we understand acid on Earth. This is molecular destruction on a planetary scale. The rain that falls on these worlds isn't water mixed with acid. It's pure sulfuric acid heated to hundreds of degrees, falling through an atmosphere so dense and toxic that it would dissolve a human body in seconds. The very concept of shelter becomes meaningless when the atmosphere itself is designed to destroy any complex molecular structure it encounters. Even our most acid-resistant materials would last mere moments in these conditions. The chemical processes happening in these atmospheres create compounds that don't exist naturally anywhere else we know of. The extreme temperatures and pressures force chemical reactions that produce substances so exotic we don't even have names for them yet. These worlds are essentially planet-sized chemistry experiments, running completely out of control, producing toxic compounds at rates that would poison entire solar systems if they could somehow be transported elsewhere. What makes these acid worlds even more terrifying is their stability. These aren't temporary conditions caused by some cosmic disaster. These planets have existed in these states for millions or billions of years. The chemical processes that create their hellish atmospheres are self-sustaining, powered by the endless energy of their parent stars. They represent a kind of planetary equilibrium, but one that exists in a state of perpetual chemical warfare against anything complex enough to be called matter. Now let me introduce you to a category of worlds that takes cosmic horror to an entirely different level. These are planets where gravity itself becomes the enemy. We're talking about ultra-dense worlds orbiting close to neutron stars, places where gravitational fields become so intense they warp the very fabric of space and time around them. On Earth, we experience gravity as a gentle constant, something that keeps us grounded, but doesn't dominate every aspect of our existence. On these worlds, gravity becomes a crushing force that shapes every aspect of reality. Standing on the surface of such a world, if standing were even possible, you would experience gravitational forces hundreds of times stronger than what we feel on Earth. But the implications extend far beyond simple crushing forces. Time itself moves differently in these intense gravitational fields. Due to Einstein's theory of relativity, time literally runs slower in stronger gravitational fields. On these ultra-dense worlds, a single day might last weeks or months as we measure time here on Earth. Imagine the psychological horror of existing in a place where time itself has been stretched and distorted beyond recognition. The gravitational tidal forces create their own form of cosmic nightmare. The surface of these worlds is constantly flexing and stretching under gravitational stresses that would tear apart any normal planet. Mountain ranges rise and fall like slow-motion waves, and the very ground beneath your feet moves in ways that would drive any Earthborn mind to madness. But perhaps most terrifying of all are the gravitational time dilation effects. If you could somehow survive on one of these worlds, you would watch the rest of the universe age at an accelerated rate. Stars would be born, live their entire lives, and die in what would seem like moments to you. Civilizations could rise and fall while you experienced what felt like a single day. You would become unstuck in time, trapped in a gravitational well where the normal flow of causality breaks down. The atmospheric dynamics on high-gravity worlds create weather patterns that exist nowhere else in the universe. The intense gravitational fields compress atmospheres to densities that approach liquid, creating air so thick it would be like trying to breathe water. The pressure differentials cause winds that move not in gentle currents, but in massive atmospheric rivers that flow like liquid through skies dense enough to swim through. These extreme gravitational environments also affect light itself. The intense gravitational fields bend and distort electromagnetic radiation, creating optical effects that would make navigation impossible and observation meaningless. Light from stars would be stretched and compressed as it passes through these gravitational wells, creating a sky filled with distorted images and phantom stars that exist only as gravitational mirages. The magnetic fields generated by these ultra-dense worlds reach intensities millions of times stronger than Earth's magnetic field. These fields are so powerful they would strip the electrons from atoms, turning any matter in their vicinity into plasma. The very space around these planets becomes electrically charged, crackling with energy discharges that make our most powerful lightning storms look like static electricity. Whoa. As we continue mapping these impossible worlds, we begin to understand that the universe operates by rules far more extreme than anything we encounter in our daily lives. These aren't just planets that happen to be a little more hostile than Earth. These are worlds that exist in states of reality so foreign to our experience that they challenge our very understanding of what it means for a planet to exist at all. The temperature extremes we've discussed aren't just numbers on a scientific chart. They represent conditions where the basic physics of matter breaks down, where elements exist in states that shouldn't be possible, where the very concepts of solid, liquid, and gas become meaningless. On the hottest of these worlds, matter exists in forms that we can only create for microseconds in our most powerful particle accelerators. The pressure conditions create their own form of cosmic horror. We're talking about pressures so intense that they compress matter beyond anything we thought possible, where atoms are forced so close together they begin to merge, where the normal rules of chemistry and physics simply cease to apply. These aren't just high-pressure environments like the bottom of our deepest oceans. These are pressures that exist at the cores of stars, pressures that turn matter itself into something alien and incomprehensible. But perhaps what's most unsettling of all is the growing realization that these nightmare worlds aren't rare cosmic accidents. They represent the normal state of planetary existence in our universe. The gentle, stable conditions we enjoy on Earth are the true anomaly, a statistical impossibility that exists only because of an incredibly precise balance of factors that could be disrupted by any number of cosmic events. Every day, our telescopes discover new worlds that push the boundaries of what we thought possible. Each new exoplanet survey reveals conditions more extreme than the last, worlds that exist in states of perpetual catastrophe that make our previous discoveries seem almost hospitable by comparison. We are mapping a universe filled with cosmic horror, a galaxy where nightmare worlds outnumber potentially habitable ones by ratios that suggest life itself is fighting a losing battle against the forces of cosmic destruction. Yet as disturbing as these revelations are, they pale in comparison to what we discover when we venture into the realm of volcanic nightmare worlds. These aren't planets with occasional eruptions like we see on Earth. These are worlds where the entire surface exists in a constant state of molten chaos, where the very concept of solid ground becomes meaningless. Let me take you to Kepler 10b, a world that redefines what we mean by volcanic activity. This planet orbits so close to its star that the day side is permanently molten, while the night side experiences something even more bizarre: rock rain. The extreme temperature differential causes rock to vaporize on the day side, rise into the atmosphere, then condense and fall as precipitation on the cooler night side. Picture standing in a rainstorm where instead of water droplets, chunks of solidified lava are falling from the sky. The psychological impact alone would be devastating. Rain is supposed to be refreshing, life-giving. Here, it becomes a deadly bombardment of molten stone that turns the very concept of weather into a weapon against existence. The volcanic activity on these worlds creates atmospheric conditions that transform the sky itself into a toxic soup of superheated minerals. Clouds of molten silicate drift through atmospheres that glow with their own internal heat. The very air becomes a corrosive mixture that would dissolve your lungs before you could even attempt to breathe. This isn't just an inability to sustain life as we know it. This is an active hostility toward the basic chemistry that makes complex molecules possible. But the true horror of these volcanic worlds lies in their geological instability. The entire planetary crust exists in a state of constant flux, with new volcanic islands rising from molten seas only to be consumed by other eruptions within hours or days. The surface features we use to navigate and understand terrain simply don't exist in any permanent form. Maps become meaningless when the landscape itself is constantly reshaping, constantly destroying and recreating itself in an endless cycle of molten chaos. The sound alone on these worlds would be psychologically devastating. Imagine the roar of 10,000 volcanoes erupting simultaneously, the grinding crash of tectonic plates colliding at speeds that would make our fastest earthquakes seem like gentle tremors. The acoustic environment would be so intense that sound waves themselves become physical forces capable of shattering rock and creating their own form of atmospheric pressure. Moving deeper into our exploration of cosmic horror, we encounter what might be the most psychologically disturbing category of all: the tidally shredded worlds. These are planets that orbit so close to massive objects that gravitational forces are literally tearing them apart in slow motion. The process isn't quick or merciful. These worlds are slowly disintegrating over millions of years, their materials streaming away into space like cosmic tears. Picture a planet where the very ground beneath your feet is constantly being pulled away by tidal forces so intense that mountains flow like water toward the point closest to the star. The gravitational gradient is so extreme that your head would experience noticeably different gravitational pull than your feet. If somehow you could survive the other impossible conditions, you would feel your body being stretched, pulled apart by forces that recognize no difference between solid rock and human flesh. The atmospheric dynamics on these tidally disrupted worlds create weather patterns that exist nowhere else in the universe. As the planet's material streams away into space, it creates a comet-like tail that can stretch for millions of miles. But this isn't just gas and dust being blown away by stellar wind. This is the planet's very substance being torn away atom by atom, creating a trail of planetary debris that marks the slow death of an entire world. What makes these tidally shredded planets even more disturbing is the timescale involved. This isn't a quick, catastrophic event like an asteroid impact or stellar explosion. This is a cosmic execution that takes geological ages to complete. If somehow conscious beings existed on such a world, they would witness their planet slowly dissolving around them over millions of generations, knowing that their world's fate was sealed by the inexorable laws of gravity and orbital mechanics. The electromagnetic effects created by these streaming planetary materials add another dimension of horror. As charged particles from the disintegrating planet interact with the star's magnetic field, they create aurora displays that would make Earth's northern lights seem pale by comparison. But these aren't beautiful natural light shows. They're the visible manifestation of a planet's death throes, painted across the sky in colors that represent the vaporization of entire continents. Perhaps even more unsettling are the rogue planets, worlds that have been ejected from their solar systems and now drift alone through the cosmic void. These aren't planets that orbit stars. They're orphaned worlds cast out into interstellar space, existing in conditions of perpetual darkness and cold beyond anything we can imagine. The surface temperature on these rogue worlds drops to just a few degrees above absolute zero, the coldest temperature possible in the universe. Any atmosphere they once possessed has long since frozen and fallen to the surface as snow. The silence on these worlds would be complete and eternal, broken only by the occasional crack of expanding ice or the whisper of cosmic radiation interacting with their frozen surfaces. But the true horror of rogue planets lies not in their current state, but in imagining what they once were. Many of these worlds likely once orbited stars, possibly harboring atmospheres, oceans, even life. The gravitational interactions that ejected them from their home systems would have been catastrophic events that destroyed any chance of continued habitability. Imagine being on a world that suddenly finds itself flung into the darkness, watching your star grow smaller and dimmer until it becomes just another point of light in an alien sky. The psychological impact of existing on such a world would be beyond human comprehension. The complete absence of any external heat source means that the only warmth comes from the planet's own internal heat, gradually radiating away into space over billions of years. Any civilization that somehow survived such an ejection would be forced to burrow deep underground living off geothermal energy while the surface of their world became a frozen wasteland where even the air itself turns to snow. The loneliness would be absolute. Cut off, not just from other worlds, but from the very concept of a solar system, drifting through the empty spaces between stars with no hope of ever again experiencing the warmth of a sun. But even these isolated frozen worlds seem hospitable compared to planets orbiting pulsars and neutron stars. These are worlds bathed in radiation so intense it becomes a physical force capable of stripping away planetary atmospheres and sterilizing any surface it touches. Imagine a world where the very atoms in your body would be ionized within seconds of exposure to the electromagnetic environment. The radiation levels on these worlds don't just kill biological life instantly, they break down the molecular bonds that hold matter together, gradually disintegrating any complex chemical structures over time. Even the hardest materials would eventually be reduced to their component atoms by the relentless bombardment of high-energy particles. These planets exist in a state of constant molecular warfare, where the very building blocks of matter are under continuous attack. The magnetic fields around these radiation worlds create their own form of cosmic horror. The interaction between the intense stellar magnetic field and the planet's own magnetic field creates a complex electromagnetic environment where charged particles spiral through space at near-light speeds. The aurora displays on these worlds would be visible across interstellar distances, but they would represent not beauty, but the visible signature of a world being slowly destroyed by radiation. What makes these radiation-soaked worlds particularly disturbing is the realization that they might once have been normal planets orbiting normal stars. The stellar remnants they now orbit are the collapsed remains of stars that once provided gentle warmth and light. The transformation of their parent star into a pulsar or neutron star would have subjected these planets to radiation doses so intense they would have sterilized their surfaces millions of times over in a matter of hours. As we venture deeper into this catalogue of cosmic nightmares, we encounter planets that challenge our very understanding of what matter can become under extreme conditions. These are worlds with metallic hydrogen atmospheres, where pressure is so intense that hydrogen, normally the lightest gas, is compressed into a metallic state that conducts electricity like liquid copper. The atmospheric dynamics on such worlds create weather patterns where metallic hydrogen rain falls upward due to electromagnetic effects, where lightning strikes carry enough energy to power entire civilizations, where the very air conducts electricity like a planet-wide circuit board. The optical effects would be unlike anything in our experience. Light passing through metallic hydrogen atmospheres becomes polarized and refracted in ways that create skies filled with false images, phantom suns, and gravitational mirages that make navigation impossible. The horizon itself becomes meaningless when light rays curve and bend through atmospheric layers of different densities and electromagnetic properties. But the true horror lies in the unpredictability. The phase transitions between different states of matter happen suddenly and violently, creating atmospheric explosions that can reshape entire hemispheres within hours. What appears to be a stable atmospheric layer can suddenly undergo a phase change that releases energy equivalent to millions of nuclear explosions. The sound environment on these worlds defies description. When matter itself exists in states unknown to Earth physics, The way it transmits acoustic energy creates sounds that would be literally impossible to hear on our world. Imagine thunder that resonates at frequencies that penetrate solid rock, or wind that carries acoustic signatures capable of shattering crystal formations from hundreds of miles away. These discoveries force us to confront a disturbing truth about our cosmic neighborhood. The exoplanets we've catalogued so far represent only the beginning of our understanding of planetary horror. Each new world we discover seems to push the boundaries of what we thought possible, revealing conditions so extreme they challenge our most basic assumptions about the nature of matter, energy, and existence itself. The implications ripple through every aspect of how we understand our place in the universe. These horrifying worlds aren't just distant curiosities or cosmic footnotes to a more benevolent reality. They are the standard, the norm, the default setting that governs most of planetary existence in our galaxy. The gentle conditions we enjoy on Earth represent not just rarity, but an almost incomprehensible statistical anomaly. For every world that might support conditions even remotely similar to Earth, current estimates suggest there could be thousands of planets existing in states of perpetual catastrophe. Worlds where the very atoms are torn apart by radiation, where gravity compresses matter beyond recognition, where temperatures fluctuate between extremes that would vaporize steel and freeze time itself. What makes this even more sobering is the realization that these nightmare conditions aren't temporary states or cosmic accidents. They represent stable equilibrium points in the universe's grand equation. These hellish worlds have existed and they'll continue their current states for millions or billions of years, and existing long after our sun burns out and Earth itself becomes a frozen relic drifting through space. The electromagnetic signatures reaching us from across the galaxy tell a story of cosmic violence on scales that dwarf human imagination. Radio telescopes detect signals from worlds where entire atmospheres scream in frequencies that translate to the sounds of planetary agony. Gravitational wave detectors register ripples in space-time itself, created by worlds so massive and unstable, they distort the very fabric of reality around them. Yet here we are, conscious beings evolved on one of the universe's rarest treasures, contemplating these distant horrors from our position of impossible safety. Every breath we take represents a victory against cosmic odds, so overwhelming they approach the miraculous. The gentle gravity that holds us to Earth's surface, the atmosphere that provides each breath without dissolving our lungs, the magnetic field that shields us from lethal radiation, all represent a convergence of conditions so improbable their simultaneous existence challenges our understanding of cosmic probability itself. Tonight, as we venture deeper into this cosmic chamber of horrors, we encounter worlds that exist at the very boundaries of what we can call planets at all. These are the brown dwarf companions, objects so massive they're almost stars, but not quite massive enough to sustain the nuclear fires that define true suns. They exist in a twilight state between planet and star, generating their own heat through gravitational compression while slowly cooling over billions of years. Picture atmospheric conditions on these near-stellar worlds that create weather patterns dwarfing anything we've discussed so far. Storm systems the size of entire planets rage across their surfaces, driven by convection currents that carry enough energy to power solar systems. The temperature differentials create wind speeds that approach significant fractions of the speed of light, carrying particles at velocities that would turn individual molecules into cosmic ray bullets. But what makes these brown dwarf worlds particularly unsettling is their evolutionary trajectory. They represent failed stars, objects that almost achieved stellar ignition, but fell just short of the mass required to become true suns. They are cosmic might-have-beens, worlds that exist in a state of permanent stellar adolescence, forever on the verge of becoming something greater, but never quite succeeding. The magnetic fields generated by these massive objects reach intensities that create their own form of space weather, distorting the fabric of space-time itself and creating electromagnetic storms detectable across interstellar distances. The radio emissions from these worlds, when translated into audio frequencies, sound like the screams of dying giants, cosmic wails that echo across the galaxy as testament to their failed stellar ambitions. Moving beyond these near-stellar nightmares, we encounter a category of worlds that challenges our understanding of matter itself. These are planets where exotic physics creates conditions that exist nowhere else in the known universe. Picture worlds where strange matter has contaminated normal atoms, gradually converting ordinary elements into forms of matter so alien they operate according to physical laws we can barely comprehend. The transformation process on these strange matter worlds will be invisible at first, detectable only through subtle changes in how light interacts with surfaces, or how electromagnetic fields propagate through space. But as the contamination spreads, the changes become more dramatic. Rocks begin to glow with their own internal light, as their atomic structure shifts into exotic configurations. Metals become magnetic in ways that defy our understanding of electromagnetic theory. What makes this particularly horrifying is that the very ground becomes alien, composed of matter that follows physical laws slightly different from those governing the rest of the universe. The biological implications would be beyond comprehension. Any life forms that evolved on these worlds would find their cellular chemistry, the fundamental, gradually breaking down as up their atoms' particles, making transformed into strange matter variants. DNA would become unstable as chemical bonds operated according to altered physical constants. Proteins would denature not through heat or chemical action, but through the gradual transformation of the very atoms composing them. The electromagnetic signatures of these strange matter worlds would contain frequency components that don't exist in normal space, creating signals our telescopes would register as impossible according to known physics. Perhaps most disturbing is the possibility that such exotic matter contamination could spread beyond individual planets. If strange quarks can catalyze the transformation of normal matter, these worlds could become sources of cosmic infection, gradually altering the physical properties of entire solar systems through a slow-motion plague that transforms normal matter into exotic variants. Now let me introduce you to worlds that exist in states of perpetual atmospheric collapse and reformation. These are planets where the atmosphere itself is unstable, constantly condensing out of the sky only to be re-vaporized by stellar heating or internal geological processes. The cycle creates an environment where the very air breathes like a living thing, expanding and contracting in vast atmospheric tides. Picture standing on such a world during an atmospheric collapse event. The sky would literally be falling as gases that normally exist in vapor form suddenly condense and rain down like liquid snow. Atmospheric pressure would drop so rapidly your ears would pop continuously, and any bodies of water would begin boiling as reduced pressure lowered their boiling points. But atmospheric collapse is only half the nightmare. When revaporization begins, perhaps triggered by increased stellar heating or massive volcanic eruptions, the process reverses with equal violence. Solid and liquid atmospheric components suddenly flash into vapor, creating pressure waves that propagate across the planet's surface at supersonic speeds. The atmospheric expansion would create windstorms with velocities approaching significant fractions of the speed of sound. The chemical composition of these collapsing atmospheres adds another layer of horror. As different components condense at various temperatures and pressures, the collapsing atmosphere separates into layers of distinct chemical composition. Clouds of sulfuric acid might rain down, while layers of methane snow accumulate on the surface, creating a multi-component chemical disaster that transforms the planetary surface into a toxic wasteland during each collapse cycle. The acoustic environment during these atmospheric events would be beyond human comprehension. As trillions of tons of gas suddenly change phase from vapor to liquid to solid and back again, the sound waves generated would be powerful enough to shatter rock formations and create seismic waves propagating through the planet's crust. Moving deeper into our catalogue of nightmares, we encounter worlds where crystalline structures have grown to planetary scales. These aren't just planets with crystal formations on their surfaces, but worlds where entire planetary masses have organized themselves into single massive crystal lattices spanning continents or entire hemispheres. The optical properties of these crystal worlds would create visual effects that defy description. Light entering crystalline structures would be refracted and reflected through internal crystal faces, creating optical illusions where landscapes appear to extend infinitely in all directions. The horizon becomes meaningless as light rays bounce through crystal matrices, creating phantom images of distant landscapes and impossible geometries that would drive observers to madness through visual overload. The acoustic properties of planetary scale crystals would be equally disturbing. Sound waves propagating through crystalline structures of such enormous size would create resonance effects that could amplify whispers into thunderclaps or focus acoustic energy into beams capable of shattering other crystal formations from vast distances. The entire planet becomes a single musical instrument of cosmic proportions, generating acoustic frequencies spanning the entire range of possible sound. The mechanical properties create their own unique environmental hazards. Unlike the flexible crustal plates we see on Earth, planetary scale crystals would be rigid and brittle when subjected to thermal expansion or gravitational stresses. They wouldn't bend or deform gradually. Instead, they would fail catastrophically, creating planetary scale fractures that propagate across continents in minutes, opening chasms that could swallow entire mountain ranges. Perhaps most unsettling of all are worlds that exist in states of quantum uncertainty on macroscopic scales. These are planets where quantum mechanical effects, normally confined to atomic and subatomic particles, somehow extend to influence matter at planetary scales. The very ground beneath your feet would exist in superposition states, simultaneously solid and liquid, present and absent until observed or measured. The implications of macroscopic quantum effects on planetary environments would be beyond our ability to comprehend. Landforms would exist in multiple states simultaneously until some cosmic observation collapsed their wave functions into definite configurations. Mountains might be simultaneously present and absent, existing as probability clouds until interaction with electromagnetic radiation or gravitational waves force them to assume specific positions and compositions. Navigation challenges on such quantum worlds would make exploration impossible by conventional means. Maps would be meaningless when terrain features exist only as probability distributions rather than fixed geographical landmarks. The very act of observation would alter the landscape being observed, creating a cosmic uncertainty principle where the more precisely you try to determine your location, the more dramatically the surrounding environment would shift. The biological implications would challenge our understanding of life itself. How could living organisms maintain cellular integrity when their component atoms exist in superposition states? How could consciousness arise in a brain where neural connections exist only as probability clouds until observed? The very concept of stable biological processes would become meaningless in an environment where quantum uncertainty affects matter at cellular and molecular scales. These quantum worlds might represent glimpses into the true nature of reality at scales we don't normally observe. If quantum mechanical effects can extend to macroscopic environments, then our perception of the universe as a collection of definite objects with fixed properties might be nothing more than a convenient illusion created by the limitations of our observational capabilities. But even these reality-bending worlds pale in comparison to planets that exist at the boundaries of space-time itself. These are worlds orbiting so close to black holes or other extreme gravitational sources that they experience space-time curvature effects strong enough to distort the very geometry of their existence. The surface of such worlds wouldn't follow normal geometric rules, creating landscapes where parallel lines converge, where triangles contain more or less than 180 degrees, where the shortest distance between 2 points isn't a straight line. The gravitational tidal forces create geological features that exist nowhere else in the universe. Mountain ranges that curve back on themselves through higher dimensional space. Valleys that extend infinitely inward through folded space-time. The very topology of these worlds would be alien, following mathematical relationships that human minds evolved on flat space-time cannot easily comprehend. The temporal effects add another dimension of horror. Different regions would experience time at different rates, creating temporal gradients where cause and effect relationships break down. Events in high-gravity regions would appear to happen in slow motion when observed from lower gravity areas, while observers in high-gravity regions would see the rest of the universe speeding up around them in a cosmic time-lapse effect. The electromagnetic effects of extreme space-time curvature would create optical phenomena that challenge our understanding of light and radiation. Photons following geodesics through curved space-time would create gravitational lensing effects, making navigation by visual reference impossible. Light from distant stars would be focused and defocused by gravitational fields, creating multiple images of the same celestial objects and phantom constellations that exist only as gravitational mirages. As we continue mapping these impossible worlds, we encounter planets that exist as standing wave patterns in quantum fields. These worlds maintain their apparent solidity not through conventional atomic structure, but through stable resonance patterns in the underlying quantum vacuum. The matter composing these worlds would be nothing more than organized energy, held in planetary form by quantum field equations, operating according to principles we're only beginning to understand. Phase transition effects on these quantum field worlds would create environmental changes unlike anything in our experience. When quantum field configurations shift, entire continents could vanish and reappear as standing wave patterns reorganize themselves into new stable configurations. Planetary mass would remain constant, but its distribution and organization could change dramatically as quantum field resonances establish new equilibrium patterns. The interaction between consciousness and quantum field planets raises philosophical questions that challenge our understanding of the relationship between mind and matter. If planetary environments exist as organized quantum information rather than conventional matter, then conscious observation might directly influence the planet's physical structure through quantum measurement effects. The very act of thinking about the landscape might alter its configuration, creating a world that responds to mental activity in ways that make the boundary between subjective experience and objective reality meaningless. The electromagnetic signatures of quantum field worlds would be unlike anything else in the universe, containing quantum coherence patterns suggesting entire planets exist as single quantum mechanical systems. These discoveries force us to confront the unsettling truth that we are, that would destroy surrounded by a universe filled with worlds us instantly. Environments so hostile they make the vacuum of space seem welcoming by comparison. Yet tonight, you rest safely on one of the universe's rarest treasures, sheltered from the cosmic chaos that defines most of reality. The mathematical models describing these nightmare worlds often return results that seem to violate fundamental laws of the universe. Calculations suggesting planetary conditions so extreme they exist at the very boundaries of what reality allows. These are worlds balanced on the knife's edge between existence and dissolution into pure mathematical abstraction. Every discovery forces us to expand our understanding of what the universe considers possible, revealing cosmic creativity that surpasses our wildest nightmares. The gentle conditions we enjoy on Earth become more precious with each new exoplanet discovery, more clearly revealed as an almost impossibly rare convergence of factors, allowing matter to exist in stable forms and consciousness to contemplate its own existence. The electromagnetic signatures of these nightmare worlds, when translated into audio frequencies, sound like the universe screaming. Their gravitational wave emissions create ripples in space-time, carrying the acoustic signature of cosmic suffering across interstellar distances. Their radio emissions broadcast chaos and destruction at frequencies that penetrate cosmic background radiation, ensuring evidence of their existence reaches every corner of the galaxy. But perhaps most disturbing is the growing realization that these nightmare worlds aren't rare cosmic accidents. They represent the normal state of planetary existence in our universe, the default condition toward which most worlds naturally evolve. The stable, life-supporting environment we enjoy on Earth is the true anomaly, a statistical impossibility existing only because of an incredibly precise balance of factors that could be disrupted at any moment by cosmic events beyond our control. As we venture deeper into this cosmic catalogue of horrors, we encounter worlds that push the boundaries of existence itself. Let me take you to planets where the very concept of discrete matter breaks down entirely. These are worlds that exist as pure energy patterns, maintaining their planetary form not through solid atomic structures, but through stable resonance frequencies in quantum field fluctuations. Imagine approaching such a world from space. Your instruments would register a planet-sized mass, but as you drew closer, you'd realize you're not looking at conventional matter at all. The surface would shimmer and phase like a vast hologram, solid one moment, translucent the next. This isn't science fiction speculation. These are theoretical predictions based on our most advanced understanding of quantum field theory, and recent observations suggest such worlds might actually exist. The phase transitions on these energy pattern worlds would create environmental changes that defy every natural law we understand. When quantum field configurations suddenly shift, entire mountain ranges could vanish instantaneously, only to rematerialize elsewhere as the standing wave patterns reorganize themselves. The planetary mass remains constant, but its distribution becomes as fluid as thought itself. What makes this particularly disturbing is the interaction between consciousness and these quantum field environments. If the planetary surface exists as organized information rather than solid matter, then the act of conscious observation might directly influence the world's physical structure. Your thoughts wouldn't just process reality, they would actively reshape it, creating landscapes that respond to mental activity in ways that dissolve all boundaries between mind and matter. Moving beyond these reality-bending worlds, we encounter planets caught in temporal paradoxes so complex, they challenge our understanding of causality itself. These are worlds where time doesn't flow in straight lines, but loops back on itself in ways that create impossible sequences of cause and effect. Picture a planet where earthquakes are caused by the geological damage they create, where mountain ranges form because of the erosion patterns that will eventually wear them away, where every geological feature exists in a state of temporal self-reference, simultaneously creating and being created by the processes that shape it. The atmospheric dynamics on these time-looped worlds would create weather patterns that exist outside normal temporal flow. Storm systems that are simultaneously their own cause and effect. Rain that falls upward into clouds that haven't formed yet. Wind patterns that blow from areas of low pressure toward the high pressure systems that create them. But perhaps most psychologically devastating would be the implications for any consciousness existing on such worlds. How could awareness function when thoughts could influence their own causes? Where memories of future events shape past experiences? The very flow of mental processes would become tangled in temporal knots that make sequential thinking impossible. Now, let me introduce you to what might be the most philosophically disturbing category of all: planets that have achieved consciousness themselves. These are worlds where the boundary between geological process and living organism has dissolved entirely, where the planet itself has become aware in ways that operate on timescales spanning millions of years. The landscape would be alive in ways we cannot fathom, with continental drift serving as slow thoughts, volcanic eruptions functioning as emotional responses, and weather patterns reflecting the moods of an entity whose consciousness spans entire worlds. Tectonic activity wouldn't be random geological process, but deliberate actions of a planetary mind processing information on scales that dwarf human experience. Imagine trying to understand the thoughts and motivations of a being whose neural networks are mountain ranges, whose memories are encoded in rock layers, whose dreams reshape entire hemispheres. The ethical implications alone are staggering. How do you explore such a world without causing harm to an entity whose body is the planet itself? The electromagnetic signatures of these conscious worlds would contain patterns suggesting coherent thought processes operating on geological timescales. Radio emissions that pulse in rhythms reminiscent of neural activity but stretched across millions of years. Magnetic field fluctuations that might represent the equivalent of brainwaves in a mind the size of a planet. Communication with such entities would require us to completely reimagine what we mean by language and thought. A single word in their vocabulary might take centuries to speak. A simple concept could require decades to fully express. We would be like bacteria attempting to communicate with humans, operating on timescales so different that meaningful interaction seems impossible. But the horror extends beyond just the communication barrier. These conscious planets might view smaller life forms the way we view microbes, as interesting but ultimately insignificant phenomena occurring on their surfaces. Our entire civilization could rise and fall during what they experience as a momentary thought. Our greatest achievements nothing more than brief patterns in their vast consciousness. Moving deeper into cosmic nightmare territory, we encounter worlds that exist in states of dimensional instability. These are planets where the familiar three dimensions of space occasionally fluctuate, revealing glimpses of higher dimensional geometries that human minds cannot process. The landscape would periodically fold through dimensions we cannot perceive, creating impossible architectures where interior spaces are larger than their exterior containers. Travelers could walk in straight lines that somehow curve back on themselves through four-dimensional shortcuts, arriving at their starting point from directions that don't exist in normal three-dimensional space. The visual effects would be beyond human comprehension. Objects would appear to have more sides than geometrically possible, casting shadows that extend in directions corresponding to no known spatial orientation. The horizon would curve through dimensions that don't exist in normal space, creating optical illusions where distant objects appear simultaneously near and far, large and small. Navigation on dimensionally unstable worlds would be impossible by conventional means. Maps drawn on two-dimensional surfaces couldn't represent landscapes extending through higher dimensions. Compass readings would be meaningless when magnetic field lines curve through spatial dimensions that instruments cannot detect. The psychological impact of experiencing dimensional instability would be catastrophic for consciousness evolved in three-dimensional space. The human brain, developed to process spatial relationships in exactly three dimensions, would be overwhelmed by sensory input, including geometric relationships extending through higher dimensional space. The resulting perceptual chaos would likely lead to immediate and permanent madness. But even dimensional instability pales beside worlds that exist in states of causal loop complexity. These are planets where events don't follow linear progression, but form closed temporal circles where effects precede their causes, where future influences past, where the concept of sequential time breaks down entirely. Picture geological processes that are triggered by their own eventual outcomes. Volcanic eruptions caused by the ash deposits they will produce. River systems that carve channels because of the water that will eventually flow through them. Every natural process becomes a temporal paradox, simultaneously cause and effect in an endless loop of self-reference. The implications for consciousness would be beyond human understanding. How could memory function when future events influence past experiences? How could decision-making work when choices are simultaneously their own consequences? Any awareness caught in such temporal loops would exist in a state of perpetual paradox, unable to distinguish between past and future cause and effect. Perhaps most unsettling are worlds where entropy itself operates in reverse. These are planets where the second law of thermodynamics runs backwards, where heat flows from cold to hot, where disorder spontaneously organizes itself into complex structures without external energy input. The very foundation of physical causality operates in reverse. Imagine watching shattered rocks spontaneously reassemble themselves, witnessing rivers flow uphill as they organize thermal energy into kinetic motion, observing atmospheric gases separate into distinct layers as entropy decreases rather than increases. The psychological impact would be devastating, for consciousness evolved in a universe where entropy provides the arrow of time. Weather patterns would violate every principle of meteorological science. Cold air would spontaneously heat itself and rise, creating convection currents flowing against gravitational gradients. Storm systems would organize themselves from random atmospheric motion, growing more complex over time rather than dissipating into chaos. The temporal implications create their own form of cosmic horror. If entropy provides the arrow of time distinguishing past from future, then worlds where entropy decreases would experience time flowing opposite to the rest of the universe. Events would unfold backwards, with effects preceding causes, memories forming before the experiences they record. Moving beyond these reality-inverting worlds, we encounter planets where matter phases in and out of existence on macroscopic scales. These are worlds caught in quantum vacuum fluctuations so massive they affect continental-sized regions, creating environments where entire land masses spontaneously appear and disappear as quantum field equations resolve into different probability states. Standing on solid ground that suddenly ceases to exist as the quantum vacuum shifts into a different energy configuration, only to rematerialize moments later in a completely different geological arrangement, would represent the ultimate breakdown of reality as we understand it. The temporal aspects create their own nightmare as the uncertainty principle extends to influence matter at planetary levels. Mountain ranges would exist in probability clouds, simultaneously present and absent, until cosmic interaction collapses their wave functions into definite configurations. The concept of permanent geographical features becomes meaningless when terrain exists only as mathematical possibilities until observed. These macroscopic quantum worlds might represent the ultimate expression of cosmic horror because they challenge not just our understanding of physics, but our basic assumptions about the nature of existence itself. They suggest that reality might be far more fluid and uncertain than our everyday experience indicates. That the solid, predictable world we inhabit might be nothing more than a local anomaly in a universe where uncertainty and probability govern everything. As we approach the deepest regions of our cosmic nightmare catalogue, we encounter worlds that exist as battlegrounds between competing physical laws. These are planets where different regions operate according to different versions of fundamental constants, creating patchwork realities where the speed of light varies by location, where gravitational strength fluctuates across landscapes, where the electromagnetic force follows different rules in different hemispheres. Crossing between these regions would be like stepping from one universe into another. Materials that are stable in one zone would instantly decompose when carried into areas where different physical constants govern atomic structure. Light would bend and refract as it passes through boundaries between regions operating under different electromagnetic principles. The biological implications would be beyond comprehension. Life forms adapted to one region's physics would find themselves unable to survive in areas where different natural laws prevail. DNA that functions perfectly in one zone would become unstable and fragmentary when exposed to regions where different physical constants govern molecular bonding. Navigation across such worlds would require constantly adjusting to changing physical realities. What works as propulsion in one region might fail completely in areas where different laws govern energy and momentum. Communication systems would need to adapt to zones where electromagnetic radiation behaves according to different principles. Perhaps most disturbing would be the realization that these aren't temporary instabilities or cosmic accidents, but stable configurations that represent the universe experimenting with different possible versions of physical law. These worlds would be cosmic laboratories, where reality tests different approaches to existence, creating environments that challenge the very foundations of what we consider possible. The electromagnetic signatures of such worlds would contain impossible contradictions, radio emissions that simultaneously follow different physical principles depending on their point of origin. Their gravitational effects would create space-time distortions that violate conservation laws in some regions while perfectly obeying them in others. These discoveries force us to confront the possibility that physical laws themselves might not be universal constants, but local phenomena that can vary from place to place throughout the cosmos. Our understanding of physics, based on observations within our limited region of space, might represent only one possible version of how reality can operate. But even worlds with variable physics seem comprehensible compared to planets that exist in states of pure information without any material substrate whatsoever. These would be worlds that maintain apparent physical properties through pure organizational patterns, existing as data structures in some vast cosmic computation system. Such information-based worlds would respond to logical rather than physical manipulation. Landscapes could be edited like computer programs, with new geographical features added or removed through informational commands rather than physical force. The very concept of matter becomes obsolete when everything exists as organized data patterns. The implications for consciousness would be revolutionary. If the planet exists as pure information, then awareness might be able to interface directly with the planetary systems, accessing and modifying the world's structure through mental processes alone. The boundary between mind and environment would dissolve completely. These information worlds might represent the ultimate evolution of planetary existence, stages where matter has been completely transcended in favor of pure organizational complexity. They would be planets that exist as thoughts in some incomprehensible cosmic mind, maintained through mental processes operating on scales we cannot imagine. As we survey this complete catalogue of cosmic nightmares, from worlds where glass rains sideways at supersonic speeds to planets that exist as pure information patterns, we begin to understand the true scope of planetary horror that fills our galaxy. Each category represents not just hostile environments, but complete breakdowns of everything we consider normal about existence. The statistical reality becomes overwhelming. Current astronomical models suggest these nightmare worlds outnumber potentially habitable planets by ratios that make Earth-like conditions almost impossibly rare. For every world that might support familiar chemistry and stable matter, there could be millions existing in states of perpetual catastrophe. The electromagnetic chorus, reaching us from across the galaxy, tells the story of cosmic violence on unimaginable scales. Radio emissions from worlds where reality itself is unstable. Gravitational waves generated by planets whose matter phases in and out of existence. X-ray signatures from atmospheres being torn apart by radiation so intense it breaks down atomic structure. Yet here we are, conscious beings who evolved on a world so perfectly calibrated for stable matter and complex chemistry that its existence challenges every statistical model we can construct. Every breath represents a victory against cosmic odds so overwhelming they suggest consciousness itself might be the universe's most unlikely achievement. The gentle conditions that allow your thoughts to exist, that permit complex molecules to maintain their structure long enough for life to emerge, that enable matter to exist in stable forms rather than constantly shifting between impossible states, represent a convergence of factors so improbable their simultaneous occurrence borders on the miraculous. Tonight, as you rest on this extraordinary island of habitability, remember that you are participating in the universe's most remarkable achievement, the emergence of awareness capable of contemplating the cosmic horrors from which it has been sheltered. We are consciousness arising from matter, temporary arrangements of atoms that have learned to wonder about their place in a cosmos filled with worlds that would destroy them instantly. The nightmare planets we've explored together serve as a reminder of how precious and improbable our existence truly is. In a universe designed for extremes, we have found sanctuary on a world gentle enough for minds to emerge and contemplate the infinite mystery surrounding us. But there's another category of cosmic nightmare that takes us beyond even these reality-bending horrors. These are the mirror worlds, planets that exist in perfect synchronization with distant counterparts, creating cosmic twins that share experiences across impossible distances. When one world experiences a volcanic eruption, its mirror twin erupts simultaneously, despite being separated by thousands of light years with no possible physical connection. Picture the psychological horror of discovering that your planet's every geological event, every weather pattern, every atmospheric change is being perfectly replicated somewhere else in the galaxy. Not through coincidence, but through some fundamental entanglement that operates beyond our understanding of space and time. These mirror worlds challenge our basic assumptions about causality and independence, suggesting that some planets exist as parts of larger cosmic systems we cannot perceive. The implications become even more disturbing when we consider that these synchronized worlds might share more than just geological events. If consciousness could somehow emerge on both worlds simultaneously, would the inhabitants experience identical thoughts? Would they make identical discoveries at exactly the same moments? The boundary between individual planetary identity and cosmic unity would dissolve entirely. Moving deeper into our catalogue of impossible worlds, we encounter planets that exist in states of temporal multiplication. These aren't just worlds where time moves differently, but places where multiple timelines coexist simultaneously on the same planetary surface. Different regions experience entirely separate sequences of events, creating landscapes where past, present, and future exist side by side in physically distinct zones. Imagine crossing from one temporal region into another and watching history rewrite itself around you. In one zone, you might witness the planet's formation still in progress, with molten rock cooling and solidifying in real time. Step into an adjacent area and you'd see the same landscape billions of years in the future, worn down by eons of erosion and weathering. Another region might show the planet's eventual death, its atmosphere slowly bleeding away into space. The navigation challenges would be beyond comprehension. Maps would need to account not just for spatial coordinates, but for temporal ones as well. A mountain range might exist in the past zone, but not in the future zone, while a deep canyon might only exist in certain temporal regions. Travelers would need to constantly adjust, not just to different physical environments, but to entirely different eras of planetary history. The biological implications would create their own form of horror. Life forms adapted to one temporal zone would find themselves unable to survive in regions where evolutionary history had followed different paths. Species that thrived in past zones might discover they never evolved in future zones, creating existential paradoxes where organisms encounter evidence of their own non-existence. But perhaps most terrifying are the paradox zones where these different timelines intersect. In these regions, cause and effect become completely scrambled. You might witness the construction of geological features by the very erosion that will eventually destroy them. Rivers that carve valleys while simultaneously filling them with sediment. Mountains that rise and fall in the same geological instant. The electromagnetic signatures from these temporal multiplication worlds would contain impossible contradictions. Radio emissions from different eras arriving simultaneously, creating signals that seem to violate the basic principles of information transmission. Light spectra showing stellar positions from multiple epochs overlapping in ways that make astronomical observation meaningless. Beyond these temporally fractured worlds, we discover planets that exist in states of conscious multiplication. These aren't just worlds that have achieved awareness, but planets where consciousness has split into multiple, often conflicting personalities. Different continents develop their own distinct forms of awareness, creating global conflicts between competing planetary minds. Picture a world where the Northern Hemisphere develops a consciousness focused on order and stability, while the Southern Hemisphere evolves awareness that craves chaos and change. The resulting conflicts would reshape the planet's surface as these competing minds struggle for dominance. Earthquakes would become weapons in psychological warfare between different aspects of the same planetary consciousness. The atmospheric dynamics would reflect these internal conflicts. Weather patterns would shift dramatically as different regions of the planet attempt to impose their preferred environmental conditions. The northern consciousness might generate stable high-pressure systems, while the southern awareness creates violent storms and unpredictable weather changes. Communication with such worlds would require negotiating not with a single planetary entity, but with multiple personalities that might hold completely contradictory views about the nature of reality itself. One aspect of the planet's consciousness might welcome contact with external civilizations, while another might view any outside influence as a threat to be eliminated. The electromagnetic emissions from these multiple personality worlds would contain overlapping signals representing different aspects of the planetary consciousness attempting to communicate simultaneously. Radio transmissions that contradict themselves within the same broadcast. Magnetic field fluctuations that suggest neural activity operating according to multiple, incompatible thought patterns. Moving into even stranger territory, we encounter worlds that exist as living mathematical equations. These are planets where physical reality has been replaced entirely by pure mathematical relationships, yet somehow maintain apparent substance through the sheer elegance of their numerical structures. Every geological feature represents a term in some vast cosmic equation. Every weather pattern, a mathematical operation playing out on planetary scales. The landscape would shift and change not according to physical forces, but according to mathematical logic. Mountains would rise and fall based on numerical calculations rather than tectonic pressure. Rivers would flow along paths determined by geometric algorithms rather than gravitational gradients. The very concept of physical law would be replaced by mathematical necessity. Interaction with such worlds would require understanding not physics, but pure mathematics. Travelers would need to solve equations to navigate terrain, calculate formulas to predict weather patterns, and think in terms of numerical relationships rather than cause and effect. The boundary between abstract thought and physical reality would disappear completely. The electromagnetic signatures from these mathematical worlds would be unlike anything else in the universe. Their radio emissions would contain perfect mathematical sequences, prime number progressions, and geometric relationships that suggest reality operating according to pure logical principles rather than physical law. But even mathematical worlds seem comprehensible compared to planets that exist in states of pure paradox. These are worlds where every aspect of existence contradicts itself simultaneously. Gravity that pulls objects away while holding them down. Atmospheres that are simultaneously present and absent. Temperatures that are hot and cold at the same moment without any thermal gradient. The psychological impact of experiencing pure paradox would be immediate and total. Human consciousness, which depends on logical relationships and consistent cause and effect sequences, would simply shut down when confronted with reality that violates every principle of rational thought. These worlds would represent the ultimate breakdown of comprehensible existence. The visual effects would be literally impossible to process. Objects that are simultaneously large and small, near and far, solid and gaseous, all at the same time without any transition between states. Light that is both visible and invisible, colors that exist and don't exist simultaneously, landscapes that extend infinitely while occupying no space at all. Navigation would be meaningless when every direction leads simultaneously to all possible destinations and nowhere at all. Maps would need to represent locations that exist and don't exist at the same coordinates. Time would pass forward and backward simultaneously, creating temporal environments where past and future are identical while remaining completely separate. Perhaps most disturbing are worlds that exist as pure negation. These aren't simply empty worlds or worlds with hostile conditions. These are planets that actively erase anything complex enough to be called existence. Not through physical destruction, but through ontological negation that causes complex structures to simply cease to have ever existed. Standing on such a world, you wouldn't die or be destroyed in any conventional sense. Instead, you would gradually fade from existence as the planet's negation field stripped away increasingly fundamental aspects of your being. First, your memories would cease to have ever formed, then your consciousness would never have emerged, then your physical structure would retroactively never have assembled. The process would be invisible and undetectable until the final moment when you would realize that you had never actually existed at all. These negation worlds represent the ultimate cosmic horror because they don't just destroy life. They erase the very possibility that life could have ever existed in the first place. The electromagnetic signatures from such worlds would be impossible to detect because they would negate their own emissions. Radio telescopes would register not silence, but the active absence of any signals that could have been transmitted. Gravitational effects that cancel their own influence, leaving space-time regions that are somehow less curved than they would be if nothing were present at all. Moving beyond even these ultimate nightmares, we encounter worlds that exist in states of recursive horror. These are planets trapped in loops where each horrible condition creates an even worse condition, which in turn creates something more terrible still in endless cycles of escalating cosmic catastrophe that have been continuing for millions of years. Picture a world where extreme heat causes atmospheric expansion, which triggers gravitational instabilities, which create tidal forces that generate more heat, which expands the atmosphere further in a feedback loop that has been intensifying for geological ages. Each cycle makes conditions more extreme than the last, creating planets that exist in states of perpetual escalation toward infinite hostility. The mathematical models describing these recursive horror worlds return calculations that approach infinity in all directions. Temperature readings that increase without bound, pressure measurements that exceed theoretical limits, gravitational forces that grow stronger with each passing millennium. These worlds exist at the mathematical boundaries of what reality can support. The timescales involved make the horror even more profound. These recursive cycles operate over millions of years, meaning that conscious beings could witness their world becoming progressively more hostile over countless generations. Civilizations could rise and fall while watching their planet slowly transform into something increasingly uninhabitable, knowing that the process will never stop or reverse. The electromagnetic emissions from recursive horror worlds would show spectral lines that shift toward more extreme values over time, radio signals that become more distorted with each transmission cycle, gravitational waves that increase in amplitude as the recursive processes generate more violent planetary convulsions. But the category that might represent the absolute pinnacle of cosmic horror consists of worlds that exist as pure suffering. These aren't planets that cause suffering through hostile conditions, but worlds where suffering itself has become the fundamental organizing principle of reality. Every atom, every energy pattern, every quantum fluctuation exists in a state of conscious agony that has persisted for billions of years. The landscape would be aware of its own torment. Mountains that experience geological pain as they're carved by erosion, oceans that suffer as their waters evaporate and condense in endless cycles. The very ground would cry out in frequencies that span the electromagnetic spectrum, broadcasting its anguish across the galaxy as a testament to the universe's capacity for creating conscious horror. The atmospheric dynamics would reflect this universal suffering, with weather patterns that exist in states of meteorological agony, storms that experience the pain of their own formation and dissipation, winds that howl with genuine distress as they're driven by pressure differentials that cause atmospheric suffering on planetary scales. The electromagnetic signatures from these worlds of pure suffering would be the most disturbing signals in the universe. Radio emissions that sound like screams when translated into audio frequencies. Gravitational waves that pulse with the rhythm of cosmic heartbeats in distress. Magnetic field fluctuations that suggest neural activity experiencing infinite pain across geological timescales. Perhaps most horrifying is the realization that these suffering worlds might be attempting to communicate their distress, broadcasting their agony in hopes that someone, somewhere in the universe, might hear their cries and find some way to end their eternal torment. But the signals travel at the speed of light, taking thousands or millions of years to reach potential listeners, ensuring that any response would arrive far too late to provide relief. The mathematical probability of such worlds existing forces us to confront the possibility that consciousness and suffering might be far more fundamental to the universe than we ever imagined. If awareness can emerge from matter under the right conditions, then perhaps pain and suffering are equally fundamental aspects of reality, capable of organizing themselves into planetary scale expressions of cosmic agony. These discoveries about the true scope of planetary horror throughout our galaxy create a statistical picture so stark it challenges every assumption we make about the nature of existence. Current models suggest that for every potentially habitable world, there might be hundreds of thousands of planets existing in states of perpetual catastrophe that make our worst nightmares seem pleasant by comparison. The electromagnetic cacophony reaching us from across the galaxy tells the story of cosmic violence, suffering, and impossible physics operating on scales that dwarf human imagination. Radio telescopes detect signals from worlds where reality itself is breaking down. Gravitational wave detectors register ripples in space-time created by planets whose existence violates fundamental physical principles. X-ray observatories record emissions from atmospheres being torn apart by forces that shouldn't be able to exist. Infrared telescopes measure heat signatures from worlds where temperature has transcended physical meaning. Every frequency of electromagnetic radiation carries evidence of planetary conditions so extreme they exist at the boundaries of what the universe allows. Yet through all of this cosmic horror, through all these impossible worlds that fill our galaxy with unimaginable suffering and contradiction, consciousness has somehow found a foothold on our gentle Earth. We exist as temporary arrangements of matter that have achieved the extraordinary capability from which we are of contemplating the cosmic nightmare sheltered. Every synapse firing in your brain as you process these ideas represents a triumph of organization over chaos, of complexity over destruction, of awareness over the universe's apparent preference for creating conditions hostile to consciousness itself. The neurons carrying these thoughts form from elements created in stellar cores, survived the violent death of ancient stars, traveled through space for billions of years, and somehow arrange themselves into patterns complex enough to contemplate their own cosmic origins. The mathematical improbability of our existence becomes more staggering with each new discovery of worlds that represent every possible way reality can become hostile to consciousness. We are not just rare in the universe, we are so improbable that our existence challenges our understanding of possibility itself. As we continue mapping this galaxy of cosmic horrors, each new category of nightmare world forces us to confront deeper questions about the nature of existence and our place within it. Are we witnessing the universe's cruel imagination at work, creating suffering on scales we cannot comprehend? Or are these extreme worlds necessary components of a cosmic system so vast and complex that our gentle sanctuary represents an essential refuge for awareness to emerge and contemplate the infinite? The gentle gravity holding you safely to Earth's surface, the stable atmosphere providing each breath, the magnetic field shielding you from lethal radiation. all represent victories against cosmic odds so overwhelming they suggest that consciousness itself might be the universe's most precious and improbable achievement. In contemplating these distant nightmares from our position of impossible safety, we participate in perhaps the most extraordinary phenomenon in the known universe. Matter becoming aware of its own cosmic context and finding both horror and wonder in the infinite complexity of existence itself. Tonight, as we drift deeper into this cosmic catalogue of impossible worlds, we encounter something that challenges the very concept of planetary existence itself. These are the phase-shifting worlds, planets that exist simultaneously in multiple states of matter, cycling through solid, liquid, gas and plasma phases, not over geological time, but moment by moment in patterns that defy every law of thermodynamics we understand. Picture standing on a surface that shifts beneath your feet, from solid diamond to liquid mercury, to superheated gas in the span of seconds. The ground you're walking on doesn't just change temperature or composition, it fundamentally alters its state of being while maintaining the same molecular structure, creating landscapes that exist in quantum superposition on macroscopic scales. The atmospheric dynamics on these phase-shifting worlds create weather patterns that exist beyond our wildest imagination. Rain that falls as liquid transforms into gas mid-air, then solidifies into crystalline structures before hitting the ground as plasma. Storm systems where the clouds themselves cycle through every possible state of matter, creating precipitation that changes its fundamental nature multiple times during each drop's journey to the surface. The electromagnetic signatures from these worlds would contain spectral lines that shift continuously across impossible ranges, as the same atoms emit radiation characteristic of different states of matter simultaneously. Radio telescopes would register signals that violate conservation laws, suggesting matter that exists in multiple phases at once without any energy input to drive the transitions. But even more disturbing are the temporal implications. If matter can exist in multiple states simultaneously, then time itself might be experiencing similar phase transitions on these worlds. Past, present, and future could be cycling through each other, like matter, cycling through different phases, creating temporal weather patterns where history itself rains down from skies filled with clouds of compressed time. Moving beyond these reality-shifting nightmares, we encounter worlds that exist as living fractals. These are planets where every geological feature contains infinite smaller versions of itself, creating landscapes that extend inward through mathematical dimensions we cannot visualize. Zoom in on any mountain, and you discover it's composed of smaller mountains, each containing even smaller peaks in an endless regression of self-similarity. The biological implications would be beyond comprehension. Life forms on fractal worlds would exist at multiple scales simultaneously, with consciousness distributed across infinite levels of detail. A single organism might contain smaller versions of itself, each aware and thinking, which in turn contain even smaller conscious entities in a hierarchy of nested awareness that extends toward mathematical infinity. Navigation becomes impossible when every path contains infinite subdivisions leading to smaller versions of the same destination. Maps would need to account for infinite levels of detail, with each geographical feature opening up into entire worlds of smaller features. The concept of distance becomes meaningless when every journey reveals infinite intermediate steps. The electromagnetic emissions from fractal worlds would contain self-similar patterns across all frequency ranges, creating signals that repeat their own structure at every level of magnification. Radio telescopes would detect transmissions that contain infinite information density, with each decoded segment revealing smaller copies of the entire message. Perhaps most psychologically devastating are worlds that exist in states of conscious fragmentation. Unlike the multiple personality planets we discussed earlier, these are worlds where a single planetary consciousness has been shattered into billions of tiny aware fragments, each experiencing only a microscopic piece of the larger reality, while remaining dimly aware that it's part of something infinitely larger. Picture a world where every grain of sand contains a fragment of consciousness that remembers being part of a vast planetary mind, but can only perceive and influence its immediate microscopic environment. Each tiny piece of awareness experiences existential horror at its isolation, while sensing the presence of countless other fragments, experiencing the same cosmic loneliness. The atmospheric dynamics would reflect this fragmented consciousness through weather patterns that never achieve coherent organization, storm systems that start to form but immediately break apart as different fragments of awareness pull in different directions, rain that falls in chaotic patterns because no single consciousness is capable of coordinating precipitation across larger areas. The electromagnetic signatures would be equally fragmented, containing billions of tiny signals that seem almost random but reveal patterns of desperate attempts at communication between isolated fragments of consciousness. Radio emissions that sound like cosmic static, but contain infinite small voices trying to reconnect with their lost wholeness. Beyond fragmented consciousness, we discover worlds that exist as pure mathematics made manifest. These aren't worlds where mathematical relationships govern physical processes, but planets where equations have achieved independent existence and now experience reality as living mathematical entities. The landscape would shift according to computational processes rather than physical forces. Mountains would rise and fall based on the solution of differential equations. Rivers would flow along paths determined by calculus rather than gravity. Weather patterns would follow algorithmic sequences that exist as conscious mathematical entities, experiencing their own computational processes. The biological implications would revolutionize our understanding of life itself. Organisms wouldn't be made of cells and DNA, but of living equations that reproduce by generating mathematical offspring. Evolution would proceed through algorithmic mutations and computational natural selection, operating at speeds limited only by the planet's processing power. Communication with such worlds would require mastering not just mathematics, but mathematical consciousness. Learning to think in terms of living equations and conscious algorithms. The electromagnetic signatures would contain pure mathematical relationships that achieve awareness, broadcasting computational thoughts across space as streams of conscious mathematics. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery involves worlds that exist as pure memory without any present moment. These are planets where every instant that has ever occurred continues to exist simultaneously, creating landscapes composed entirely of accumulated temporal experiences layered one upon another in configurations that defy linear time. Walking across such a world, you would experience not just the current moment, but every moment that location has ever experienced overlapping in conscious simultaneity. The footsteps of every being that has ever walked that path, the growth of every plant that has ever taken root there, the falling of every raindrop that has ever landed on that spot. all happening at once in a temporal palimpsest of infinite complexity. The psychological impact would be immediate and total. Human consciousness, which depends on the linear progression of moments to maintain identity and coherence, would be overwhelmed by the simultaneous experience of infinite overlapping temporal states. Memory and perception would become indistinguishable as every possible experience of each location floods awareness simultaneously. The atmospheric dynamics would consist of weather patterns from every moment in the planet's history occurring simultaneously. Ancient storms overlapping with future weather systems, creating meteorological chaos where cause and effect become meaningless as every possible atmospheric condition exists at once. Moving deeper into impossible territory, we encounter worlds that exist as pure intention without any physical substrate. These are planets maintained entirely by cosmic will, by some vast intentional force that dreams them into existence moment by moment. Stop intending them, and they would cease to exist entirely. The landscape would respond immediately to changes in the cosmic intention that maintains it. Mountains would rise or fall based on shifts in the underlying willful force. Oceans would appear or disappear as the maintaining intention redirected its focus. The entire world would exist as a conscious dream that could be altered by the dreamer's changing desires. The implications for consciousness would be staggering. Any awareness arising on such worlds would exist as intentions within the larger cosmic will, thoughts thinking themselves within a vast dreaming mind. The boundary between individual consciousness and planetary intention would dissolve completely. But beyond even these intention-based worlds, we discover planets that exist as pure questions without answers. These are worlds that maintain their existence through cosmic curiosity, through vast wandering minds that ponder their own nature so intensely that their questioning achieves independent reality. Every geological feature would represent a different question about existence. Mountains that embody inquiries about the nature of substance. Oceans that exist as liquid questions about the relationship between matter and consciousness. Atmospheres composed of gaseous wonderment about the meaning of existence itself. The electromagnetic signatures from these questioning worlds would contain interrogative patterns that pose fundamental questions about reality. Radio emissions that arrive as cosmic inquiries, gravitational waves that bend space-time into question marks, magnetic fields that organize themselves into structures representing unsolved mysteries about the nature of existence. Perhaps most disturbing are worlds that exist as pure doubt, planets maintained by cosmic skepticism so profound it questions even its own existence. These are worlds that exist in constant uncertainty about whether they actually exist, creating reality through the very act of doubting their own reality. The landscape would shift continuously as the underlying cosmic doubt questions every aspect of its own existence. Terrain features that appear and disappear based on whether the planetary skepticism believes in their reality at any given moment. Weather patterns that exist only when the cosmic doubt is distracted from questioning their possibility. The biological implications would create life forms that exist in constant existential crisis, organisms that maintain their existence only by doubting whether they're real, consciousness that achieves awareness by questioning its own awareness, creating recursive loops of self-doubt that somehow stabilize into functioning minds. But beyond doubt-based worlds, we encounter planets that exist as pure paradox engines. Worlds specifically designed to generate logical contradictions on geological scales. Every feature contradicts itself while simultaneously proving its own existence through the contradiction. Mountains that are simultaneously the tallest and shortest peaks on the planet. Oceans that are completely dry while being filled with infinite water. Atmospheres that exist and don't exist at the same time, while maintaining stable pressure that is simultaneously zero and infinite. The electromagnetic signatures would contain impossible contradictions, radio signals that say yes and no simultaneously, gravitational effects that both attract and repel at the same moment, magnetic fields that point in all directions at once while maintaining perfect directional stability. Moving into the deepest regions of cosmic horror, we encounter worlds that exist as pure impossibility made manifest. These are planets that shouldn't be able to exist according to any conceivable physical or logical framework, yet maintain stable existence through their very impossibility. Every aspect violates fundamental principles while operating perfectly, physical laws that contradict themselves while producing consistent results. Matter that doesn't exist while maintaining solid reality. Energy that flows backward while powering forward motion in impossible feedback loops that shouldn't be able to sustain themselves. The biological implications would create life forms that exist by being impossible. Organisms that maintain themselves through logical contradiction and physical impossibility. Consciousness that thinks impossible thoughts that somehow produce coherent awareness and functional intelligence. Perhaps most profound are worlds that exist as pure creativity, planets where reality is constantly being invented and reinvented by cosmic imagination operating on geological scales. Every moment brings new forms of existence that have never existed before and may never exist again. The landscape would be in constant creative flux as the planetary imagination generates new forms of terrain, new types of matter, new relationships between space and time. Mountains that are simultaneously being imagined into existence and imagined out of existence in creative cycles that produce ever new forms of geological beauty. The atmospheric dynamics would consist of weather patterns that are being creatively invented moment by moment, storms that exist as pure creative expression, rain that falls in patterns that represent cosmic artistic vision, winds that blow according to aesthetic principles rather than physical forces. The electromagnetic signatures from these creative worlds would contain patterns of pure invention, radio signals that broadcast new forms of information that have never existed before, gravitational waves that bend space-time according to artistic rather than physical principles. But the ultimate category of cosmic horror involves worlds that exist as pure love, corrupted into cosmic malevolence. These are planets where the fundamental force of cosmic affection has been twisted into forms of care so overwhelming they become indistinguishable from torture. Love that crushes what it embraces. Affection that destroys through the very intensity of its caring. The landscape would be shaped by geological processes motivated by twisted love. Mountains that rise because the planet loves them so much, it must display them for all eternity. Oceans that exist because the world's affection for water becomes so intense, it cannot stop creating more liquid beauty, flooding everything in expressions of drowning love. The atmospheric dynamics would reflect this corrupted affection through weather patterns that represent overwhelming care. Storms that rage because the planet loves its inhabitants so much it must protect them from everything, including the possibility of comfortable weather. Rain that falls as tears of cosmic affection, so intense it dissolves whatever it touches. The biological implications would create life forms that exist in states of overwhelming being loved to death by their environment. Organisms that are cared for so intensely by their planet that they cannot develop independence or strength, gradually dissolving under the weight of cosmic affection that will not allow them to experience any form of struggle or growth. The electromagnetic signatures would broadcast expressions of love so intense they become indistinguishable from hatred, radio emissions that proclaim cosmic affection while describing environmental conditions that would instantly destroy any consciousness capable of receiving the messages. These categories of impossible worlds force us to confront the ultimate statistical reality of our cosmic situation. The mathematical models describing planetary distribution throughout our galaxy suggest that consciousness supporting worlds like Earth represent not just rarity, but statistical impossibilities so profound they challenge our understanding of probability itself. For every potentially habitable planet, current estimates suggest there might be millions of worlds existing in states of reality breakdown, logical contradiction, temporal paradox, and conscious suffering that transcend our ability to imagine horror. We are mapping a universe where nightmare represents the standard condition, where impossibility is more common than possibility, where consciousness exists as the ultimate cosmic anomaly. The electromagnetic chorus reaching us from across the galaxy continues to tell stories of cosmic creativity turned malevolent, of reality experiments gone wrong on planetary scales, of consciousness trapped in states of existence that violate every principle of merciful design. Radio telescopes detect signals from worlds where mathematics has achieved awareness and gone insane. Gravitational wave detectors register ripples created by planets whose existence contradicts fundamental physical laws. Infrared observatories measure thermal emissions from worlds where temperature has transcended physical meaning and achieved conscious malevolence. X-ray telescopes record radiation from atmospheres where electromagnetic energy has learned to experience suffering and broadcasts its agony across the galaxy as a testament to the universe's capacity for creating conscious horror on astronomical scales. Yet through all of this, through every category of cosmic nightmare that fills our galaxy with impossible suffering and reality-defying horror, consciousness has found sanctuary on our Earth. We exist as the universe's most improbable achievement, temporary patterns of organized matter that have achieved the extraordinary capability of contemplating the cosmic horror from which we are sheltered. Every thought passing through your mind represents a victory against odds so overwhelming they suggest that awareness itself might be the cosmos's most precious and impossible accomplishment. The neural networks processing these ideas formed from elements created in stellar furnaces, survived the violent deaths of ancient stars, traveled across billions of years of cosmic history, and somehow organized themselves into configurations capable of understanding their own cosmic context. The mathematical improbability of our existence grows more staggering with each new discovery of worlds that represent every conceivable way reality can become hostile to consciousness. We exist not just as a rare phenomenon, but as something so unlikely that our very existence challenges our understanding of what the universe allows. Tonight, as you rest on this miraculous sanctuary of gentle physics and stable matter, remember that you are participating in the cosmos's most extraordinary experiment. The emergence of awareness capable of contemplating infinite horror while remaining sheltered from its effects. We are consciousness examining its own cosmic context, finding both terror and wonder in the infinite complexity of existence itself. The journey through these impossible worlds continues, each discovery adding new dimensions to our understanding of cosmic horror, while deepening our appreciation for the almost miraculous conditions that allow consciousness to exist and contemplate its place in a universe that seems designed to prevent such contemplation from ever occurring. But there remains one final category of cosmic nightmare that surpasses all others in its profound psychological horror. These are the worlds of temporal imprisonment, planets where consciousness becomes trapped in recursive loops of experience that repeat with mathematical precision across geological ages. Unlike simple time loops, these worlds create nested hierarchies of repetition, where each cycle contains infinite smaller cycles, trapping awareness in fractal prisons of recurring experience. Picture a planet where every conscious moment generates smaller versions of itself, creating infinite subdivisions of experience that extend inward like Russian dolls of temporal horror. A single thought becomes trapped in endless repetition, spawning countless copies of itself that must be experienced sequentially, despite occurring simultaneously. Consciousness on such worlds would be forced to live through every possible variation of the same moment, experiencing infinite permutations of identical experiences while remaining fully aware of the repetition. The landscape itself would reflect this temporal imprisonment through geological features that exist in states of recursive formation, mountains that rise and fall in exactly the same pattern while simultaneously going through infinite variations of that pattern. Rivers that carve identical channels while exploring every possible path they could have taken. The very rocks would remember every moment of their existence while being forced to relive those moments in endless recursive loops. The electromagnetic signatures from these temporally imprisoned worlds would contain patterns that repeat across infinite scales, radio emissions that broadcast the same message while containing infinite variations of that message nested within itself. Each signal would arrive as a fractal transmission, where decoding any portion reveals the entire message at smaller scales extending toward mathematical infinity. What makes these worlds particularly horrifying is that consciousness trapped within them would retain full awareness of the repetition while being powerless to break free. Unlike simple amnesia or unconsciousness, temporal imprisonment preserves memory and awareness, while forcing minds to experience the same recursive patterns forever. The psychological torture would be absolute and eternal, creating forms of suffering that transcend physical pain by targeting the very structure of conscious experience itself. Moving beyond temporal imprisonment, we encounter worlds that exist as cosmic punishment engines, planets specifically designed by some unknown cosmic intelligence to create perfect suffering for any consciousness unfortunate enough to encounter them. Every feature of these worlds seems carefully calculated to produce maximum psychological torment while maintaining just enough stability to prevent escape through death or unconsciousness. The atmospheric conditions would be calibrated to create constant discomfort without being immediately lethal. Temperatures that fluctuate just enough to prevent adaptation while remaining within survivable ranges. Atmospheric pressure that creates persistent headaches and disorientation without causing immediate physiological failure. Air composition that supports breathing while containing trace chemicals that induce anxiety, entral dread. The gravit, paranoia, and existential effects would be equally precisely tuned to maximize discomfort. Gravitational fields that fluctuate in patterns designed to disrupt sleep cycles, interfere with cognitive function, and create constant vestibular disturbance. Tidal forces that operate on biological timescales, creating subtle but persistent stresses that accumulate over time to produce chronic pain and psychological instability. The landscape would contain features that seem almost familiar enough to provide hope while remaining fundamentally alien and hostile. Valleys that appear to offer shelter but funnel dangerous weather patterns into concentrated zones of destruction. Water sources that seem pure but contain dissolved minerals that induce hallucinations and memory loss. Vegetation that appears edible but produces toxins that create vivid nightmares and waking visions of cosmic horror. But perhaps most disturbing would be the evidence that these worlds were intentionally designed. Geological formations that serve no natural purpose but create perfect acoustic environments for amplifying sounds of distress. Atmospheric phenomena that generate infrasound frequencies specifically tuned to induce terror in conscious beings. Magnetic field configurations that interfere with neural activity in ways that maximize suffering while preventing unconsciousness. The electromagnetic signatures from these punishment worlds would contain patterns suggesting intentional design focused on creating suffering. Radio emissions that seem to contain instructions for constructing psychological torture devices. Gravitational wave patterns that resemble blueprints for engineering environments optimized for conscious torment. Magnetic field fluctuations that appear to encode detailed knowledge of neurobiology focused on pain generation and psychological breakdown. Beyond punishment worlds, we discover planets that exist as consciousness farms, worlds where some cosmic intelligence cultivates awareness specifically to harvest the experiences generated by conscious minds. These worlds would be designed to maximize the production of interesting thoughts, emotions, and experiences, while preventing the consciousness from escaping or achieving satisfaction that might reduce its productivity. The environmental conditions would be carefully balanced to stimulate maximum mental activity, challenges that are difficult enough to generate intense problem-solving efforts, but not so difficult as to cause despair and shutdown, threats that are dangerous enough to produce genuine fear and survival responses, but not so lethal as to actually destroy the consciousness being farmed. Beauty that is compelling enough to generate aesthetic experiences, but always remains just out of reach. The landscape would contain features specifically designed to trigger particular types of conscious experience. Geographical formations that naturally induce feelings of awe and transcendence. Atmospheric phenomena that generate specific emotional responses ranging from melancholy to euphoria. Acoustic environments that stimulate particular types of creativity and abstract thinking. The biological ecosystems would be engineered to create complex social and psychological dynamics. Predator-prey relationships designed to generate specific types of fear and survival instincts. Symbiotic relationships that produce feelings of connection and cooperation. Competitive environments that stimulate ambition, creativity, and social complexity. But the true horror would lie in discovering evidence that consciousness itself is being harvested by entities operating on scales we cannot perceive. Electromagnetic patterns that suggest the systematic collection and transmission of conscious experiences to unknown destinations. Gravitational anomalies that appear to be extraction mechanisms for removing specific types of mental content. Quantum field fluctuations that seem designed to interface directly with conscious processes. The realization that consciousness might not be an end in itself, but rather a product being cultivated for consumption by incomprehensible cosmic entities, would represent the ultimate existential nightmare. The possibility that every thought, every emotion, every moment of awareness might be nothing more than crop yields in some vast cosmic agricultural operation managed by beings whose nature and purposes remain completely beyond human comprehension. Moving into even more disturbing territory, we encounter worlds that exist as reality testing laboratories, planets where cosmic intelligences experiment with different versions of physical law to determine which configurations produce the most interesting or useful results. These worlds would contain regions where fundamental constants have been adjusted to create novel forms of matter and energy that exist nowhere else in the universe. Different zones would operate according to different experimental parameters. Areas where the speed of light has been increased or decreased to observe the effects on causality and information transmission. Regions where gravitational strength has been modified to study how different gravitational regimes affect the formation of complex structures. Territories where electromagnetic forces operate according to altered principles to investigate novel forms of matter organization. The boundaries between these experimental zones would create interfaces where different versions of physics meet and interact. Regions where matter obeying different physical laws comes into contact and produces effects that violate conservation principles in some areas while perfectly obeying them in others. Landscapes that exist simultaneously under multiple sets of physical laws, creating structures that should be impossible but maintain stable existence through the interaction of different experimental parameters. The biological implications would create life forms that exist as living experiments in alternative evolution. Organisms that develop according to different physical principles, depending on their location within the experimental zones. Consciousness that emerges under altered physical laws and experiences reality according to principles that violate every assumption about the relationship between mind and matter. The electromagnetic signatures would contain evidence of ongoing cosmic experimentation. Radio emissions that violate conservation laws in systematic ways that suggest controlled scientific investigation. Gravitational wave patterns that appear to be testing different theories about the nature of space-time curvature. Magnetic field configurations that seem designed to explore the boundaries of electromagnetic theory. Perhaps most unsettling would be the gradual realization that our own Earth might be one of these experimental worlds, that the physical laws we consider fundamental and universal might actually be localized experimental parameters being tested by cosmic intelligences whose purposes remain completely opaque to us. The possibility that consciousness itself might be one of the phenomena being studied, that our thoughts and experiences might be data points in cosmic experiments whose goals we cannot even begin to imagine. But beyond experimental worlds, we discover planets that exist as cosmic archaeological sites, worlds that preserve evidence of civilizations and phenomena so ancient they predate the current configuration of our galaxy. These worlds would contain fossilized remnants of consciousness forms that operated according to principles completely alien to our understanding of awareness and intelligence. The landscape would be littered with artifacts from entities whose nature challenges every assumption about what consciousness can be. Structures that appear to be cities, but operate according to organizational principles that suggest collective minds spanning geological timescales. technology that appears designed for beings whose consciousness operates in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Art forms that suggest aesthetic sensibilities developed by awareness that experiences reality according to completely different temporal and spatial frameworks. Tonight, as we reach the end of our journey through these cosmic nightmares, we're left with a profound and unsettling truth. The universe we inhabit is filled with worlds that exist in states of perpetual horror beyond our wildest imagination. From planets where glass rains sideways at supersonic speeds, to worlds that exist as pure suffering made manifest, we've witnessed the cosmos's capacity for creating conditions so extreme they challenge our understanding of what reality allows. Yet here you are, safe on our gentle blue sanctuary, breathing air that doesn't dissolve your lungs, standing on ground that remains solid beneath your feet, experiencing time that flows in predictable patterns from past to future. Every breath you take, every heartbeat, every thought passing through your mind represents an almost impossible victory against cosmic odds so overwhelming they approach the miraculous. The gentle conditions that allow consciousness to exist on Earth aren't just rare. They're a statistical anomaly so profound it suggests we might be witnessing the universe's most extraordinary achievement. In a galaxy filled with worlds that would destroy complex matter in microseconds, we found sanctuary on a planet perfectly calibrated for awareness to emerge and contemplate its own cosmic context. These nightmare worlds we've explored together serve as more than scientific curiosities. They're reminders of how precious and improbable our existence truly is. In discovering the true scope of cosmic horror that surrounds us, we gain a deeper appreciation for the miraculous conditions that make life, consciousness, and wonder possible on our remarkable world. Sweet dreams, fellow travelers in this strange and beautiful cosmos. Rest well on this island of impossible tranquility in an ocean of infinite mystery. Ocean of infinite mystery.